Back for another Six Rings and Football Things Prospect podcast. And as you can see, if you're watching the video version, it's almost time to draft party based on the balloons behind me in my spare bedroom office closet area. I am Andy Jumbo Hart. He is Mike Cadlick. And as we crawl our way through this interminable prep and lead up to the NFL draft, which seems like it's been going on since November.
Forever.
We
Going
get
on
to
forever.
But it's fun, you know.
There's
worse things we could be talking about and doing in life. So whatever. We've reached the point where we're going to talk about some biggins, some stouts, some fire hydrants, the interior offensive and defensive lines. I would say not necessarily major areas of need for the Patriots, and maybe areas where they don't even really address based on the depth they have veteran-wise. They've invested in the guard and interior line position in recent years with City So and Jake Andrews and different people. So, it wouldn't stun me with all the other needs and, even positions like wide receiver where you may want to double dip or, hit a tight end, hit a running back. Wouldn't surprise me if these two positions we're going to talk about today don't even get targeted or hit on.
Yeah. I'm comfortable really with the Patriots where they're at right now. I mean, even a guy like Cole Strange, who everyone seems to, can't stand sometimes. Look, was he overdrafted at 29? Yes. But when he's healthy, he's a pretty good player. And so, that's a guy who, you need depth behind him. But they, like you mentioned, they've sort of built that out already with City So and Mafi and Jake Andrews. So, and then on the interior defensive line, too, Christian Barmore's a stud. Devon Godchaux plays really well. Dietrich Wise is solid. So, they're kind of filled on both sides here. So, not necessarily a position of need for the Patriots on either side.
Okay, so let's start with the offensive side of the ball.
Sure.
There's some interesting names in here. We've been so fixated, I feel like, on the wide receivers and the quarterbacks. And certainly when we get to the defensive side of the ball, I think that's sort of an underrated position in this draft. I actually liked watching some of the D tackles. But I guess we'll start with a guy I know Scheim talked about when we did the tackle podcast. Graham Barton from Duke. Is he a center? Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? He's certainly an NFL offensive lineman. He's certainly, I don't think he's probably a tackle in the NFL. Watching him play, I do think he's probably going to be an interior guy. But there's a lot to like. 6'5", 313, 3-year starter for them, 2-time all ACC. I think he has average feet, which is what I think will hinder him on the outside in the NFL. I actually wrote next to him Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney was a left tackle at NC State. And went on to be a great guard in the NFL for the Patriots and piling up Super Bowl rings with a couple of elite franchises. I think that's what Graham Barton is probably going to be, a high-end guard in the NFL. And there's no shame in that. Now, where that value presents him to NFL teams, I know we've talked a lot about tackle, and could there be a run on tackles at some point late in the first round, early in the second? How does that affect the interior line? But I think Graham Barton will probably have a nice 10-year NFL career for himself at guard.
100%. I think his floor is super high. I don't think he doesn't have much of a bust factor. And I think the fact that he can play, like you said, guard, center, tackle, helps his cause. He can, wherever they see fit, you mentioned it, he's an NFL offensive lineman one way or another. He can play. His size is there. The fact that, like you said, 3-year starter, that helps. This isn't like a guy who all of a sudden bursts on the scene and then you throw him in there and then he stinks, right? I think he can play essentially from day one. And I think he's going to be a first rounder. I think you talk about the run on tackles. The run on tackles is going to happen, whether it's in the middle or the end of the first round. Someone's going to pounce on Graham Barton between 28 and 32, in my opinion. A really good player, high floor. I too see him as an interior guy. Like you said, I just think the tackle position in the NFL now is, the high end is so good, and it's good in this class too. So I think it's, someone tries him on the inside, but no, he's a really good player. I don't have much to say about him otherwise, besides I really think his floor is super high. I don't think he has much of a bust factor in the next level.
Another guy we touched on that I guess some people think is a guard based on his height and length, Troy Fautanu out of Washington. I know I raved about him in the Tackle Prospect podcast.
That was your guy.
Yeah, I love him, and he's the opposite of Barton for me. I think he's too good to be a guard. I think he has tackle NFL ability. And I know he's not 6'6" or 6'7" and doesn't necessarily have that going for him.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that, again, like Barton, I'm pretty sure if he's a guard, he's a guard, whatever. And I think you'll have your Joe Tooney, Logan Mankins guard for a decade plus. I think he brings that athleticism and that mean factor. So those two guys out of the way, whatever position they are late first, early round, early second round picks.
I do this, and I did this when you mentioned Fatanu in the tackle pod. Like I said, Isaiah Wynn, and I think I do that because if I like a guy, I love that they have positional versatility, and if I don't like a guy, I don't like that they like. It's like, oh, you don't know where you're gonna put him, whatever. And I don't know what it's been about Fatano, because the more I look and the more I watch and the more I hear and research, he's just a gamer. And so like I think the Isaiah Wynn comp might have been a little unfair at the time, but I just sometimes get like, I don't know. It sometimes turns me off when guys, you don't know if they're going to play guard or tackle, because then you put him outside and he's not that good, and you put him inside and it's like the Mike Onwenu thing. And now granted that's worked, but yeah, Fatanu's a stud, and I'm with you too. I think he's going to end up as a tackle at the next level because he is just too good. He's too skilled to not put him at a premier position at tackle.
Yeah, there's the jack of all trades, master of none kind of aspect to NFL players, and sometimes I get caught up in that. I think Derwin James was the guy that I was like, he's a really great athlete, but I'm not sure what you're gonna do with him. Like, what exactly is he? And then some guys, because I've seen interviews with some of the Chargers staff, they go, we don't know what he is. We know he's good. We know we put him on the field each week, and he's one of our best players. Like, we're not going to define him because there's no rule that says you have to. I mean, I guess technically there are for like franchise tags and stuff, but there's no actual rule where you
remember when the Jaguars tried to make Denard Robinson an offensive weapon, and they wrote like OW on the roster, and the NFL was like, you can't do that. Like,
but other than that, if you just have good players, a lot of, Cooper DeJean from Iowa. I know there's been a lot of weird social media stuff from him from the NFL the last couple of days, basically mocking that he's white without coming out and saying it. Like he's sneaky. He's not sneaky fast. He's fast, or he's not sneaky athletic. And I was like, so we're doing that. I mean, I like it. I never know when those things are a third rail or when they're not a third rail that you're not supposed to touch.
Yeah. Well, we do it on here, and then we see it on the NFL. It's like, what are they doing? They're not supposed to do that.
Well, we do it. We're just a freaking podcast.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They're the league. It's like when, and this is good. It's a tangent here, but like, it's like the gambling thing where, we all talk about gambling. We talk about it. But then when the Yankees social media account tweets out the over-under on the strikeout, it's like, you can't do that. We're only allowed to do that.
Or one of the Sports Center anchors made a joke during an analysis like, that's not even gambling. That sounds like surefire investment or something. And they made him like issue an apology later because it is gambling and we don't mean to insinuate.
And ESPN has their own sports book. Like,
So, but we don't have a gold check mark. So I feel like we can joke about race more than gold check mark NFL can joke about race. Anyway, getting back on track, a local guy who I want to talk about, who I think is really interesting, from the best offensive line in the country, part of the group that made J.J. McCarthy's job so easy that somehow he's moving up draft boards. Zach Zinter, who finished with a broken leg, I think 2 bones in his lower leg. But he's a 3-year guard, All-American, captain, sort of, I don't know, probably the prototype of what you'd want to, probably even a little bigger than the prototype at 6'6". Just a good football player, smart kid, leader. Like,
I don't have anything. The only knock on Zinter I have is the injury. And like, I think he would be tier 1, A1, back end of the first round player if he didn't break his leg at the end of the season. And that's tough for him, and it's too bad. But like, it just kind of happens where guys fall off. You don't know if you can play them right away. You got to deal with rehab. And so teams pass on them. Where if that didn't happen, again, you mentioned the size, 6'6", 322, 42 starts. So like, he has the size and he has the experience to already play at the next level. So like, it's just a matter of the rehab and how that goes with his leg. But no, he was awesome for Michigan for the last 3 years. And when that happened in that game, I was like, oh, that's like, I remember like, I don't usually like, not that I don't usually care when players get injured. I don't mean it like that, but that specific one, I saw him go down. I was like, this guy had it all going, national championship, first round play. And then it just like went away from him. So that was too bad, but no, he's awesome.
He kind of reminds me of the other side of the ball. I remember what I thought about Christian Wilkins coming out of Clemson, another local guy who went to a big program out of Massachusetts, like good student, good leader, good energy, good athlete, good build, like the total package. Like, I would put Zach Zinter in that. I don't think you'll ever regret drafting him
Right.
category. Like,
Yeah.
he'll find a spot on your team. He'll find a spot in your leadership group. He'll find a spot and everything you ask him to do in the community. Like,
Right.
so Zach Zinter, I think, is an interesting guy. Another guy that I liked was Cooper Beebe out of Kansas
Yeah.
State.
Kansas State. Yeah.
6'3", 322, which I would say is sort of prototypical. I know sometimes like length or whatever. I don't know. I don't really care about length at guard. I care about a guy that's got a little
Yeah.
sand in his pants, can run a little bit to pull, and can hit people. And he's a 4-year starter for them. He played some left tackle, then moved to guard. All-American. I think he was an Outland Trophy finalist. To me, he's like a road grader. He's like a guy you like to watch just like hit people and see what happens. And I liked everything I saw about him. There were a lot of guys in this range. They all ran basically like 5 flats, 5 whatevers at 320 pounds.
Yeah.
So Cooper Beebe looks like
Beebe too. He, from what I understand, is like very good, equally run and pass. So like, there's not really a knock on either game. He's good at both, and
right.
And road grader too, like a guy who just run over people. A guy you want to bring in too. So.
Absolutely.
I'll throw out there too. I'm going to throw out someone who seems to have, it's a little volatile on what he is and what he isn't, but center Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon.
Yep.
Look, and it seems to be going like the media and the fans like him more than the NFL grades him out to be. And, people in mock drafts have him in first round. It comes out that, no, he's not a first round player. But, I mean, look, he killed the combine. He showed out. And I don't want to put this on him, like, to give him this ceiling. But, like, it kind of reminds me of Jason Kelce, where, like, not that
the luchador, the wrestler, Jason Kelce, that guy.
Yeah, right. I mean, just a guy who, like, maybe it's not all there. Maybe the size, the speed, the length, the whatever isn't all there, but he's a center. He's a baller. He's a gamer. He's just going to go out there and try and rip your face off every single play. He's tough as nails. He's not going to get hurt. Like, that's what I see in Jackson Powers Johnson, just a dude who is stuck in the middle of your offensive line, plays every single game, and winds up being a franchise cornerstone for a long time. So maybe there's a little bit of a floor and people don't like it as much as others, but I think he's just a stud. I think he's a beast, and I think he's going to be really good at the next level.
Yeah, I am. I like Jackson Powers Johnson. I like somebody else better that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Okay. But just in terms of centers, I've always, and I've certainly been probably lulled into a false sense of whatever in New England over the years, where you can, if you get a guy that can kind of play, he's smart, he might be undersized, he might not be strong, but I mean, flat out, Dan Copen, Ryan Wandell, what's his name? The guy who returned the kickoff. Like, they've had
Dan
all these
Connolly.
Dan Connolly,
Brian Stork for a year too.
Right. Like, and now David Andrews, obviously undrafted for the last, whatever that's been, 8 years. Like, I don't need the most powerful guy. I don't need the most athletic. I need a smart guy who's tough, who knows what the hell he's doing, leadership. Like, there's some of those intangibles to me, because at center, I mean, I know you're going to come across, and this has screwed them at times, like Chris Jenkins, the original, not the second that we'll talk about in the second part of this podcast. He used to kill the Patriots. And it's like, yeah, you're going to have a couple matchups a year. It's almost like the DeForest Buckner where people say, Cole Strange. There's going to be times where you're just not big enough, strong enough, athletic enough. But I feel like more often than not at center, can you combo block? Do you know, like, technique and angles and different, like, you can win as much with your head as you can with your.
It's a very smart position, and you can kind of find that. Yeah.
You're 296 instead of 320. Okay. Would I rather you do all of that at 320? Sure. And then you'd go in the first round or whatever. But I'll take the 296 that I might get in the 5th or 6th round. So a guy I fell in love with who I didn't know much about, Cedric Van Pran Granger, which I'm not even sure if that's his full name. The Granger part got added somewhere. It was just Van Pran or whatever. Dude's a stud in my eyes. Georgia, 6'4", 310, 5'2". You look at it and you're like, oh, that's slower than some of these other guys. I was talking about a lot of 5 flats.
When you said 5'2", I thought you were talking about his height for a second. I was like, what the hell?
That'd be a little short, I think.
Yeah, it would.
3-year starter on, obviously, a title-winning offensive line over the last few years. He's just feisty, and he uses his hands, and he's physical, and he moves well to pull when you want him to. Like, there's some guys that move okay, and then there's guys that you're like, oh, that looks That looks athletic. That looks natural. That looks simple. I fell in love with Cedric Van Prangranger in this draft. So I think he is going to be a stud center for somebody. Maybe a guard, but a stud center at the very least.
That's a outside of Isaiah Wynn, that's a program that has just kind of bred really good offensive linemen for a while now. You talk about Amarius Mims this year,
Yep.
but Broderick Jones last year. Like, they've just been really solid. So I think any guy from that program you're bringing in, you're probably going to get a guy who can play. Not maybe from day one. Maybe you got to ease him in a little bit like the Steelers did last year with Jones. But you learn from a good program. You play in the SEC for that long, then you're going to be solid. So
okay, a couple guys with local ties or from local programs that we should probably touch on. Couple Christians, and I mean that by first name. I don't know their religious status by any means.
One of them probably has to be though at BC.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I don't know about have to be, but yeah, probably there's a potential for it. Christian Haynes out of UConn and Christian Mahogany out of Boston College. Let's start with Haynes. 6'3", 217, 25 reps, that 503.40, 4-year starter at right guard for them. Couple-time third-team All-American, team captain. Handled himself well at the Senior Bowl from what I read and kind of watched a little bit. Finishes in space. He's not overly stout. I saw him kind of get pushed around again. But again, I don't totally care about that because I think that might kill you every once in a while. But otherwise, you got some combo blocks in there. You're kind of hiding them between some guards, depending on what kind of guard play you get. I thought he was meh. I don't know that he's even a starting caliber NFL offensive lineman.
I agree.
Kind of a guy.
We want to give the shout out to the local guy, but like, I'm not completely sold on him either. And you talk about the meh and the getting thrown around. You're getting thrown around at UConn. Like, what's going to happen when you get to the league, right? And so, I mean, I've seen a couple of lists with him as like the #1 interior offensive lineman, and I'm not sold on Haynes. I mean, he could prove us wrong. He could go in, but yeah, right now I have him down the list for he's more of an honorable mention for me than he does in my top 5. So
I agree.
Mahogany, on the other hand, I love Christian Mahogany. 6'3", 314. The footwork can be troublesome at times with him. But overall, a guy that he was at the Shrine Bowl. We talked about him with we had Kyrie Thompson on a couple months ago. He said that he was getting reps at center as well. So a little bit of positional versatility there. I don't think he'll be in the Patriots range, but that's sort of the one interior offensive lineman, if he's there towards the later half of the draft, I would love the Patriots to grab. And it could be biased. It could be a BC thing, but it's also, you talk about Haynes versus him. Mahogany played well in the ACC, which is better than, I don't even know what conference does UConn play in now. Like the the American. You're right. Yeah, but that's my point. I like Mahogany a lot better than Haynes. I think he can translate as a pro more than Haynes can.
Yeah, I like him. I don't love him. The one thing I see, like, he's big, powerful. He's got some of that road grader to him, but he doesn't sustain block. Like, there's an initial contact point, and then he loses it a little too often for my liking. And I think that's a little bit of athleticism, a little bit of technique and footwork and kind of playing through it. But he definitely, he's the better Christian. He's a better Christian than Haynes. And I think he has
school for it.
Right. Naturally. I think he can play. I don't think he's like a plug and play starter by any means in the NFL. But developmentally, I think he's a chance that he has the tools, 6'3", 314, as I said. He can kill people at times. And you look for people that can do that can just flat out move people and run people over. He has that. I think there's a sustainability. Anybody else you want to touch on before we jump over to the defensive side of the
let's see. 2 guys that made my honorable mentions list. Zach Frazier from West Virginia, good player, played there for a while. And then South Dakota State's Mason McCormick. I guess I'm contradicting myself about Haynes playing at UConn, but it's different because McCormick balled out in that conference. And so sometimes when you get dudes, I don't know, Midwest guys, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, who just are beast mode in their conference for 4 years, I think they can translate it. I think it works. You talk about, who was the kid last year? Cody Ma, just like a beast mode from North Dakota State. I see that in Mason McCormick a little bit, so I like him a lot. So those are my two additions to this segment.
Yeah, I feel like going back I don't know, 6, 8, 10 years, there's almost always a small school offensive lineman stud that
Yeah,
could, that not only in the draft, but generally, like you had Ali Mopart or whatever from
yeah,
Hobart, Division
Lamar, yeah.
Three. I mean,
Shout out
Cole
Keith.
Strange was a first round pitch out of Chattanooga. Like, I feel like there was a South Dakota State kid a couple years ago. I just
Yeah,
feel like that guy, whoever they pick as scouts and sort of like the guy from that level, generally has a pretty good track
yeah,
record of being able to compete in the NFL. Speaking of competing, so we talk about interior offensive linemen. They've been competing with defensive tackles. I like this group
so do I.
more than I expected. More like if I had to battle, if I said who's better, the interior O line or the interior D line in this draft, give me the D
D-line
line
all day.
100
The,
times out of
the
100.
offensive line group is a little like not overrated, but it's just not as strong. And I like.
Well, I think the offensive line group is going to, I mean, it's riding sort of the high end tackles. There's
Yeah,
that group
no,
of
that's
whatever
true.
it is, 6 high end tackles. Then I'm not sure there's great interior line depth. I'm not even sure there's great tackle depth. The defensive tackle position. So let's go right out the gates
Let's do it.
at an issue I always have with defensive players, whether it's Georgia, whether it's whoever. So I go to Texas, and they have
Mhm.
2 stud defensive tackles. One who's
That they
more
do.
your two gapper, the big old Sweat, who's 6'5", 366, and then you have his like Batman and Robin teammate Byron Murphy, who's the 6'1", 297.
Yep.
You know, sort of Aaron Donald 3 technique, beat people in the gaps.
Aaron Donald. That's what I have written for Byron Murphy.
And I
Yeah.
think he can be, but I also am like, well, what if some of these other guys played with a teammate that was that like Sweat is a human double team. You have to
Yeah.
double team him. If you don't double team him, he is going to make your life miserable. And that benefited Byron Murphy. So, and Sweat was, I believe Sweat was the conference defensive player of the year.
Yes.
And
Yep.
like Murphy was the defensive lineman of the year for the conference. Like they were both elite.
Nasty. They're nasty.
And I like both of them. I just wish I could see them more solo so I could try to ascertain like who really is Batman and who's Robin. But just
It's a good point.
from what I watched, I think both are going to be good defensive linemen in the National Football League.
Yeah, and I guess we have to talk about it, the off-field stuff with Tavondre Sweat too, because not only he got pinched DWI on Sunday after a crash in Texas, and the only reason not the only reason I mentioned it, but there was some off-field question marks with him as well. Like he had talked about it apparently with teams.
Right.
He was a big partier when he was first at Texas and seemed to sort of wean himself off it, get better and be more dedicated. But then this happens too. So obviously going to have to answer questions there. However, the play on the field, like if he didn't have off-field questions, he's probably my favorite defensive tackle in the class. You mentioned 2 gapper stud. He ran the slowest 40, but it doesn't matter when you're a guy like that. Like you don't. I mean, it helps to be fast, but he's just run stuffer, run stopper, a dominant defensive tackle. So if he can clean up the off the field issues, I love him. And then Byron Murphy too. You read lacks ideal mass and length, and you probably read that with Aaron Donald too. And Aaron Donald is retiring as one of the best defensive tackles ever. So yeah, I guess you're right. And I don't know why, but when I was sort of doing this, I didn't think about it that way, and I probably should have. But you kind of want to see them apart because do they just work off each other? Or are they only good because somebody else you have to worry about? It's like the Josh Uche, Matthew Judon thing, where Uche was a stud when Judon was on the field, and then as soon as Judon got hurt, Uche's play lacked. So you wonder, but no, I have them sort of 1 and 2. I have Sweat sort of falling off because of the off-field stuff, and my number 2 we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a second. But no, those guys from Texas are awesome. And
Sweat, to me, gets the nod simply because that Parcellian phrase, planet player, there's just not, there's more Byron. Now you can weigh skill level on the Byron Murphy group, but there simply are more 6'2", 300 than there are 6'6", 360s that can play football. There's just not a lot of those guys born and developed. The alcohol thing is interesting in light of not just, obviously it's an issue, but like Henry Ruggs, Andy Reid's son. It's clearly a topic, an issue, a problem in the NFL that they are. And I just wonder, and especially as you said, like he seemingly, based on reports, was saying the right things, and then his actions weren't marrying up to his words.
Right. It's tough.
So, and I'm no holier than thou. Like, people drink, I drink, like, but you have too
Yeah,
much to
when
lose.
you're there,
What are
you
you
gotta,
doing?
especially like a DWI too. It's like get a ride. I don't know. We don't have to
Right.
go into the whole thing, but when you're at that level, you need to be
It's a
smarter. You need
problem.
to 100%. Yep.
Like, the fact that this happened is as much an alcohol problem, but also like just a decision making, like, what the hell were you thinking
One
kind of
month before the draft.
right.
Like,
Like,
yeah, right.
so what are you going to do when you are drafted and have your contract and like now you don't have as much to worry about? You're going to be even dumber. Well, you're being
Right.
about as dumb as you can be right now. So how could you be dumber? So
Bingo.
I don't know how you weigh that. I really
Right.
don't.
It's hard.
I I would probably err on the side of passing on him because of that. Like, certainly in the first round, I would not take him because I can't risk it. And
Yeah,
you've
you can't
you've
trust
made
it.
it.
It's tough.
Yeah, you've made it. I don't know. So next in line for me, I really liked Jerzon Newton out of
Yeah.
Illinois. In that 6'2", 300-pound range, all American. I love writing motor up arrow, and he's a motor up arrow for me.
Yep.
I wrote big boy playmaker. Like, he's around the ball, he's making plays, he's doing things. There's a certain energy and effort there
Yep.
that I really, really liked. They
My note was similar. Definition of strong was my note. He's just
absolutely.
that dude in the middle that just commands the entire defensive line because he's just some mammoth of a human.
And he had this weird, I wrote third step faster than the first. Like, I don't think he's one of those guys that has to or even really does win on that first step.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like by the time he gets to the second or the third, he's really winning. Like, and he
Yep.
is winning the edge, getting the gap, chasing. Like, I think he's a really good football player. Also, random
Not
note,
get. No, go ahead.
he goes by Johnny. So,
Oh,
for
okay.
whatever that's worth,
Johnny
makes sense.
Newton. Yeah, not giving up is huge. Like on the
Right.
interior
Like,
offensive
it
line, defensive
sounds
line.
simple, but
I know, but some guys just go through your block. If you miss it, if it's gone, you stand up and you look around and you wait for something to
right.
happen. And other guys don't, and that's huge in football in general. But yeah,
All right. You got somebody you want to bring up next?
Braden Fisk, Florida State, killed the combine. He's fast, 4.780. He ran the fastest 40, and he dominated. I think he was first team All ACC. I could be
Yeah.
wrong on his act, but first team All ACC. The only knock / issue I have with him is he was a Western Michigan transfer, and then he was sort of a one-hit ACC wonder. So, like, does that mean you put it all together at a smaller school, you go to the SEC or the ACC rather, and you dominate, and then you're just on an upward trajectory? Or was that a lucky one hit, and then you're going to kind of go back to your? Not that he was bad at the small school, he was good enough to transfer to D1, but long story short, I just wonder about the consistency playing high level football. But no, he's awesome, and I like how fast he is because that obviously. I mean, you talk about, and I'm not going to compare him to Vince Wilfork, but Vince Wilfork at his size was very, very fast,
Mm-hmm.
and that helped his game. And so, like, I look at Tavondre Sweat, who's not fast. It doesn't really matter, but it helps. Long story short, Fisk is very fast, and he's also a beast. So, that's an added element to his game.
Yeah, he's another guy I wrote athletic motor. He's going to give you what he has. I thought just a solid all around. I'm not sure he has one area of his game that's like, oh, this is why he's a prospect. Right. And from my perspective, I think that going from Western Michigan to Florida State, I like that he had that tweener step to show like I can compete at this level too, and I'll show you at the next level I can compete. I think he is the start of the second tier kinder for me. Where I like him. I think he's going to come in and be a good player. I'm not sure he's a great player. You know, like the Patriots take Keon White, for example, that type of guy. And you're like, oh, he's got talent. He can develop into something. Not sure he's a centerpiece foundational item like Christian Barmore, Keon White, maybe divide there where I see them as, and I know they have different roles, but
no, I get your point.
One guy that I actually think is above him is the aforementioned Chris Jenkins. I really liked him.
So do I.
He's not his dad. He's more in this group of the 300s. His dad probably weighed, I don't know what they listed him at. His dad was probably 400 at times in his career. But he looks to me like the son of a pro. Like he looked like a veteran defensive lineman. And obviously that's a good school to be coming from for the lines and the trenches and the way they play and everything there. So 6'3", 299. I also I like the guys that are strong, that bench,
Yep.
29 reps. I like those guys. Third team All-American. And I don't know that the production is great. I think he only had like 4 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss, but he used his hands. And I've always going
Yeah.
all the way back to Anthony Pleasant in the 2000s, like the amount of emphasis that the guys put on hand placement. Like we fixate on like pad level and speed and quickness and power and strength. And they're like, these things are the most important thing you
Yeah.
can have as a defensive lineman. And to me, Chris Jenkins looks like a professional hand fighter on the defensive line. And if you're starting from that, I think that's a really good point to leap off of.
100%. And watching when in prepping for this podcast with the O line and the D line, the first 2 guys I wrote down were Jenkins on the defense and Zach Zinter on the offense and it's because I watched so much Michigan this year because they were the best team in football and you see them, but like they stand out on the field. And guys who you look at and you'd have to do a double take, like, holy moly, that guy's a monster. Like that was Zinter and that was Jenkins on that side. So to be one of the better defensive players on the best defensive team and the best team in college football last season. I mean, like I'm looking at my, rankings that I'm going to end up writing for .com later. Like I have him at 5 and now I sit here and I'm like, I need to move this guy up. Like he's just because, I mean, I talk about Fisk as someone who was good at Western Michigan and okay, whatever. Chris Jenkins was nasty at Michigan. Like that's saying something. So I love him too. I don't have much of a knock on him. Beast against the run. Could improve a little in pass rush, I guess. Doesn't have the the numbers, but sometimes it doesn't matter. You make an impact without stats. So I love Chris Jenkins too.
And he is a 4.91 guy. Another guy, there was a bunch of sub 5, sub 4.9, even like 4.8 type 300-pound defensive lineman. A guy I wasn't overly familiar with. I'm not even sure how to say his name. Rook or Horo out of Clemson.
Okay.
6'4", 294. As I said, 4.89, 3-year type player, 25 tackles for loss, 12 sacks in his career. 29 reps. He's Nigerian. I'm always interested in the backstory. Some of these guys that are born elsewhere. I think he came to the U.S. at like 8. He's explosive. He's muscular. He's athletic. He, to me, has some maybe untapped upside, polished up with some technique, but looks just like a guy with the potential to be a more dominant force maybe at the next level. And he's an example of a guy, I think if you put him next to Sweat, his production would immediately go up. Like his athleticism and ability would maximize those opportunities of single coverage and all that. So Rook, I'm just going to call him Rook.
All right. I'll throw in one yin and yang and then another honorable mention that I was thinking about too. First of all, Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, LSU kids, they worked off each other down there. Both really solid guys who you talk about it with the Texas guys. You want to see them on their own and see if they can, be better as not just as teammates on the inside. But those two are solid. And then Darius Robinson, we already talked about him on the edge rushers, but he reminds me so much of Dietrich Wise, where he can play on the outside, he can slide him inside. Different breed, planet player, like you mentioned, just a massive human being who is slow but can still come off the edge, and then you can also kick him inside to play defensive tackle. So I really like Darius Robinson too from Missouri. I think that's a guy who we talk about football players. It doesn't really matter where you are, but you're just a massive human being, and I'm going to find a spot for you. That's Darius Robinson to me.
I probably should have asked this earlier from a Patriots perspective, as instead of when we're winding down the prospect podcast here. But if you were Elliot Wolf, if you were drafting, are you looking more two-gapper, Devon Godshaw, run stuffer? Are you looking more of an athletic, some of these other guys we've talked about, that can penetrate and get a little pass rush? Like which type of D tackle would you be more allured by?
Probably, like you said, the two-gapper run stuffer in Godshaw, because I don't know how long he's going to be here. And I look at Barmore too as like a do-it-all player, obviously, because he's just different. But I would say someone who can come in the pipeline behind Godshaw and sort of be that massive run stopper, like a Tavondre Sweat or something like that.
Because the Patriots have gotten by in recent years with sort of that rotation of Carl Davis and like veterans,
Daniel Akwale.
Journeyman. I don't even know how I want to describe them. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but they kind of are who they are. depth chart fillers at D tackle. So if they were going to go a youthful route, I would probably say the same, because Godchaw, I think we all agree, isn't as good as Bill Belichick thought he was, isn't as valuable as Bill Belichick thought he was. But there's also sort of a scarcity and a rarity. There's definitely more in this class of the 6'2", 300s than the big fire hydrant type
100%.
Run stuffers. Did you have one more honorable mention you wanted to throw out there?
I have Eric Watt written down too. We talked about him too, but he's a guy who can play on the inside and the outside. So I'm curious to see.
Well, and that's the other thing is some of these guys are the Dietrich Wises, the Keon Whites. Even can you reduce down and be an inside guy on third down? There's not a lot of 3-down players unless you're taking them at the top of the draft. So some of that role wise. So okay, as we wrap this up here in Six Rings and Football Things Prospect Podcast, we both kind of poo-pooed the offensive line. We didn't love the group. We're not sure they're going to target the group. But I will say here, if you were to pick one of these guys as a potential Patriot, what would it be? Where would it be? Day 3 kind of thing, maybe? I don't know.
I'm going to stick with my guy, Christian Mahogany. I like him from BC. I think he can I like the fact that he can kick in the inside too and play center. I just, a local kid, bring him in and see what you can do. So I like Mahogany from BC. And I want to say Tavondre Sweat on the defensive line if he falls and if you can figure it out. But the Patriots are really going for that culture right now.
Right.
And I don't think you bring in a guy like that. And I don't blame them either.
Yeah, no, he'd be a fun guy. I also wonder too, I'm guessing they're going to hand Christian Barmore like $100 million at some point in the next 6, 8, 10 months, whatever it's going to be. So I'm not sure they want to overinvest in that defensive line spot.
Right.
I'm going to go with my guy Rook from Clemson.
All right.
I like his upside. We'll see. Again, it won't stun me if neither of these two positions, interior O-line or interior D-line, get touched by the Patriots. Right. These could be undrafted rookie opportunities for the team as they fill out their class, because I think certainly we've talked a lot about it. They all likelihood going to go quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, some order through the first 3 picks. So as we wrap this up, one more question for Mike Kadlick, timely question, even though these are supposed to be timeless podcasts. As we get here under 2 weeks or just over 2 weeks to the NFL draft, there seems to be a strange affinity for and unanimity among media where #TakeDrake has taken over the world. And I'm reading the Boston Globe. Oh, it's obvious they got to take Drake May. I'm reading the Boston Herald. It's obvious they got to take Drake May. Yeah, some of us have been banging that drum for months now, but welcome aboard to the hype train.
Yeah, seriously.
Is it too obvious? Is there any part of you that feels like if we all agree, there's no shot in hell of it happening?
Yeah, kind of. I'm getting ready for Jaden Daniels now. I want to start like really digging in more to Jaden Daniels and falling in love with his game, because I feel like that's what's going to happen here. And I want to make sure that I'm not disappointed when he comes here, because he's also a really good football player. But yeah, it's becoming too much. Everybody loves Drake May. Nobody really hates Drake May around here, that he's probably going to be taken by Washington at number 2.
Yeah, other than Merrill Hodge and whoever else, like there's a couple haters on a national level, but locally it feels like everybody has pinpointed Drake May. And you're right. I've been all along. There's 3 quarterbacks. I want one of the 3. Like I've been, that's my simple, and it does feel like they could fulfill that request, take Jaden Daniels number 3, and everybody's gonna be like, yeah, I guess he's okay. I kind of wanted Drake May. Like I don't, and that's probably not fair to him. That's probably not really fair to the team. And if Drake May simply goes 2, there's not much they could do about it. I mean, they could trade up, but there's okay. So that's where we are as we head down the home stretch here to the NFL draft. We will be back here on Six Rings and Football Things, the Prospect Edition, next week, when I think we will be talking about safeties and linebackers. I believe that's all we have left. So we'll double dip on that. Safeties and linebackers, 2 positions of need for the Patriots, although a true free safety could be in the offing, especially after the new big contract for Kyle Duggar, 4 years and $60 million or whatever it was.
Cash. Burning cash.
Good for him.
We're burning
Another guy they re-signed as part of the keep the band together, even though the music stunk last year. We'll figure it out and add to it.
No, I hate this. No, I don't know if you saw my tweet. I hate it. It's so stupid. They're bringing back good players on a good unit, and they're resetting the bad unit. Give Van Pelt, give the number 3 pick a damn chance, okay? We're running it back with our good players.
I was going to see if I could slide that in there and see if I could set you off.
No.
He is Mike Kadlick. We'll save that argument for maybe a future one-off Wednesday here on the Six Rings football feed. For now, though, the interior offensive line, interior defensive lines in the books, and one more positional prospect podcast to go here on Six Rings and Football Things, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And yes, there are more days between now and the NFL draft. Peace out.
Bye.